Good morning. So, today we are going to plan the rest of our narrative text. Remember, a narrative text is basically a fancy English way of saying a story. So, we're going to plan our story today. We're going to consider our introduction. We're going to make notes about 3 events that happen in our story. And we're going to consider our ending. But before we start, let's hear the next part of the story. Now was the demon dragon's chance, and he took it. Seething with war hatred, he opened his bitter jaws and seized the champion by the neck. The serpent's fangs bit deep into the flesh, and Beowulf's life blood poured from him. Beowulf, that young hero, was as good as his word. His courage did not fail him now. He summoned all his strength and sprang forward into the dragon's fire to defend his lord. Hands and head were burned as he came through it, but he was not to be put off, this brave warrior. He would do his duty. Beowulf did not aim for the scaly head of the beast, but instead went for the soft throat, stabbing deep into it with his sword, a thrust so powerful that the dragon was forced to loosen his grip on Beowulf, so stunning that the fiery flow was suddenly stemmed and staunched forever. Coming again to his senses, the great king seized his moment, whipped out his battle-sharp dagger and drove it to the hilt into the dragon's body. So together, the 2 heroes downed the dragon. They did not stop stabbing him till an end was made of him. Till his last gasp of life, the last death breath was over, and the monster was still. But for Beowulf, this was to be his last victory of so many, and he knew it already. The poison in his wounds was beginning to burn and swell inside him. He sat down heavily on a ledge of rock, knowing the shadow of his own death was upon him, feeling the fatal pain of it blowing in his chest. Beowulf, ever attentive to his lord and friend, ever loyal, bathed his blooded king, unfastened his helmet, did all he could to staunch the bleeding, to relieve this pain. But death he could not staunch. No one can. The fearless leader knew well now that this was the end of his time, of all his earthly happiness. He had only one wish to fulfil before his life left him. He called Beowulf closer, for his speech was thin now, his breathing short. "Go now, dear friend," he said. "Go into the mound and find this serpent's treasure hoard. I want to see it with my own eyes before I die. Those ancient jewels, your golden inheritance, just once I want to see it." Beowulf did not hesitate to obey his lord. Blooded and burnt as he was, he ran past the dead hoard guardian and into the barrow, deep into that house of treasures, into the winged serpent's den of darkness. Many and magnificent were the marvels he found there, old tarnished relics of a vanished ancient race of warriors, piles of drinking cups and heaps of helmets and twisted torques, all of the most precious gold. No wonder this death dragon had fought so hard to keep it. And high above the hoard there hung the battle standard of the tribe, woven entirely in glowing gold that shone even in the gloom of the place, brightly enough even to light up the treasure below. Swiftly, for he knew there was no time to waste, Beowulf gathered all he could carry out, golden cups and flagons, and that ancient battle standard too. Even burdened with his load of treasures, Beowulf ran all the way back out of the tunnel. With every eager step he worried that his lord might already have died out there while he was gone. And when the brave thane at last saw his leader, he did seem almost dead, barely breathing still, his eyes closed. Beowulf sprinkled his face with cooling water, begging him to wake up and live. Deep in his death sleep, the battle king heard Beowulf's voice calling him back, opened his eyes, and saw the gold honest Beowulf had brought to show him. He thanked the youngster for all he had done for him. He was thoughtful, even in death, this hero. And then, breathless, spoke these last few words. I have defended my kingdom these 50 years as best I could, served my people as wisely as I could. For that I thank my God, the King of all glory. And to him also I give thanks for these treasures that I see before my dying eyes, for the opportunity to acquire them for my people on my death day, to sustain them in all their needs in the future when I am gone. Beowulf, my beloved friend, I fear I can stay no longer. Tell them, and this is the last command of their king, to build me a tomb high on the cliff overlooking Grosness. Let it stand always as a towering reminder of me to my people, so that masted ships dipping through the sea mists may see it and remember it always. Let the place be known forever as Beowulf's Barrow. So saying, he unclasped the golden collar from around his neck and gave it to Beowulf. His helmet, armour and arm rings too he handed to the young spearman, reward for his courage and loyalty. Use these well, good friend, he said. These were the old man's last words, spoken with his last breath. At that moment his soul left his body, soaring heavenwards on its way to everlasting glory. How Beowulf grieved then at the passing of his king, and the suffering of his life's end. It was no consolation to him that nearby lay the corpse of the terrible death dragon, no joy to him that the destroyer had been destroyed, that he would no longer fly the night air, no longer terrorise and torment the people. It was no matter either that the beautiful treasure hoard of unimaginable wealth was theirs. Right, what's going to happen in your story? Remember, your story is set between Beowulf killing Grendel's mother and the part of the story that we're listening to now. So we're talking probably almost straight after Beowulf's killed Grendel's mother. That's where your story is set, or when your story is set. So today we're going to use a planning board to plan our stories. I have attached this to your Purple Mash email. If you're unable to open that, right at the end of this video, it's on screen. It's also on screen now. So you could just make a version of it, draw a little version of it in your book. But if you can use the one that's attached to print it out, then that is fantastic as well. The important thing is to get your plan down. So we're going to use this planning board. First is the introduction. So, where does your story start? Think about the 5 W's: who, when, where, why, and what. If you can answer those 5 questions in your introduction, then the readers or the reader will know what's going on. If you miss some of those things out, the reader won't know what's happening. So fill in that first box. Who's the story about? When is it happening? Why is it happening? What's happening? Having this one out. Who, when, where is it happening? Why, what? I've lost track of what I've said, but you know. So answer those 5 questions and put them in there. Right, have a look at the map. Remember the map from yesterday? Hopefully you were able to open the file. If not, there's a tiny version of it up in the corner there, but you should have notes on it anyway. So, the first event, the first thing that actually happens in the story, once we've had our introduction, is going to be his journey. Where does he go? What route does he take? What choices does he make? What dangers does he face along the way? In stories, especially adventure stories, fantasy stories like this, it is rare that the characters just kind of get to where they're going with nothing really happening. Usually something happens along the way. So will something happen along the way in your story? So I want you to fill in the first event boxes. This is my example, so it should be something like this. So the event says he arrives at farm from sea. You'll notice this is in notes. I'm not using full sentences. Monster is gone. First visits Heorot, then chooses North Road past castles. Sleeps near castle and fights giant bats. Sets off next morning to the plain. So on his journey, he's already had to fight some giant bats. And then there's another box for details. So here's some details. Bats kill one of companions. The road is rocky and they abandon horses. It rains a lot. The food is nutritious but does not taste good. So you can imagine if I turn that into full sentences with description, already I've got quite a lot going on in my story. Okay, look back in your book to the description of the monster we did. Where does Beowulf find this monster? What happens? How long is the fight? What does the monster do to Beowulf? What does Beowulf do to the monster? Remember, quite often, to make it more dramatic, the hero will get injured or something will happen to him. It's a bit boring if the hero just comes along and kills the monster and he's absolutely fine. So think about what could happen in this fight. When you've done that, fill in the second event. Don't get as far as beating the monster. We're just talking about the fight itself, not the end of the fight. That's important. So here's mine. Trail leads to Black Cave. Beowulf sneaks in. Beast emerges holding a hostage. Beowulf leaps and chops off Beast's hand. Had? I should say hand. Hostage is free. Beast continues to fight. Go outside. Beast is blinded. Beowulf injures leg. Sword is lost. Beowulf is weakened. So a bit of suspense there. Beowulf is weakened. What's he going to do? So let's think about that. How does Beowulf defeat the monster? Is Beowulf unharmed or injured? How does he feel afterwards? What happens to the monster? Does it die or escape? So this is what happens in my example. With the last of his strength, Beowulf lifts the monster and throws him onto a spiked rock. The monster's blood dissolves the stone, but it cannot survive. Beowulf chops off its horns for souvenirs. His leg is badly injured, but luckily someone brings some horses. So that's my third event. So after the main story, you have to think about our epilogue, what happens at the end. So how's his journey back? What happens when he gets back to the mead hall? How do people remember the story in the future? All of this can go in the ending box on your plan. There's some other boxes as well to fill in, and we'll just have a quick look at them now. So we should already have our introduction, our first event, which was the journey, our second event, which was the fight, and our third event, which was defeating the monster. Here, we've then got our ending. In our ending, are we going to link back to something that happened in the introduction? We should really, in the ending, try and talk a little bit about why it all happened and how we've resolved it. Down here, you've got a little space to make a note of some sentence openers and some conjunctions that you might use when you're doing your writing, to save you having to think about those tomorrow. And again, some language features. Are there any alliterative phrases that you've thought of? Are there any descriptive adverbs and adjectives that you've thought of? You can make a note of them in there so that tomorrow, again, you don't have to think about them. They're ready in your plan for you. Like I say, if you can't print off this planning format, you could just draw this table in your book or even just use these as subheadings to write a straightforward plan. The important thing is getting these notes down so that tomorrow when you write your story, you're really focusing on the description and not having to focus on what's actually happening. Right, I'm looking forward to writing these stories tomorrow, and I'll see you then. Bye.